Hi guys, so I hope you got on okay with the first lesson. As I say, I'm just trying to make them in 15-minute units initially. The lesson will take longer than 15 minutes because you have to pause it from time to time, but I don't want to overload you with too much in one go, so hopefully you found that manageable for a starting point. Okay, so similar to yesterday then, we'll do a little task first. You've got a memorisation drill for a quotation, but then we'll start to look at an exam task together, so it'll be a little bit more complex today, and hopefully we'll get on to building a GST paragraph as well. Okay, so this is the first task. You're going to need to pause this so that you can do this task. There's 3 icons, as you can see on the screen, and all I want you to do is to make some notes. Think, what do these icons represent? How do they relate to Macbeth? How do they relate to the plot of Macbeth? But more importantly, how do they relate to the big ideas? So if you could pause the video and spend 5-10 minutes thinking about the icons. We've obviously got a crown, we've got a moon and a sun, which represents the merging of light and dark, and obviously we've got a ghost, which represents supernatural. Okay, so hopefully you've had a few thoughts about that. If there was any of those icons you really couldn't do and you thought, I don't have a clue what Shakespeare is suggesting, why light and dark is relevant to the play Macbeth, or why kingship is, obviously email your English teacher so that they can give you some information and a little bit of help. Don't all email me because obviously I can't respond to everybody. Just email your own English teacher. Okay, moving on then. So we're on to the memorisation drill. Again, I've gone with quite a simple quotation today. Macbeth does murder sleep. Same as yesterday. Please can you pause the video for 60 seconds, repeat the line to yourself as many times as you can in 60 seconds. Okay, and then again, the same as yesterday, I've removed 1 word. So please can you say the missing word aloud? Super. I've now removed 3 words. Please can you say the line aloud to yourself by adding in the missing 3 words? And finally, can you please say the whole line aloud from memory? Great, well done guys. Okay, so obviously that's really straightforward when you do it like this, but creating a testing system, maybe putting lines on flashcards, just the first word or first 2 words of the quotation on a flashcard, so that then you can test yourself from memory. Over time, these lines will start to get into your brain. Okay, so as I said then, the main thing I want to do today is to look at an actual exam task, and I've put this exam task on Show My Homework. So if you have a printer, you may wish to print it off, but if not, we can work with it on screen. So as you can see, the exam task fundamentally has got 3 parts. Year 11s, you'll be familiar with this. Year 10s, it might be the first time you're seeing this. The first part of the task tells you about an extract, so it gives you some information about an extract. On the right-hand side of the screen is the actual extract it's referring to, and then the bottom left-hand corner of the screen is the exam task. So we've got 3 sections, but really it's 2 because we've got the extract and we've got the task. This particular task says, read the following extract from Act 5, Scene 5 of Macbeth. At this moment in the play, Macbeth is preparing for battle against the army of Malcolm and Macduff when he hears the cry of a woman. So hopefully your brains are all whizzing away and you've realised Act 5, Scene 5 is a 5-act play, so this is right at the end of the play. Macbeth has gone through several changes as a character, psychologically destroyed himself through enacting evil choices. So we've got a good sense of what the extract might be about without just reading it. If you look at the mark scheme there, it says there's 34 marks available. 4 of those are for SPAG. SPAG stands for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So you are potentially able to pick up a few more marks for accuracy, full stops, capital letters, punctuation, clarity of expression. So we don't want to lose a single mark on anything. So even though it may seem only 4, we want to get all 4. The most important bit, and the bit I want to look at with you now, is the actual question. So bottom left-hand corner, it says, starting with this moment from the play, explore how Shakespeare presents ideas about consequences faced by individuals. Write about how Shakespeare presents the presents Macbeth, that should say, in this section, how Shakespeare presents ideas about consequences in the play as a whole. Okay, I always say to my classes, even though the exam question appears at the bottom of the page, that's the most important thing to look at, because actually knowing what you're answering is more important than knowing what the extract is. The other thing I say to them is, if you notice here, it says starting with. Well, actually that's misleading, because there's no requirement to start with the extract. And as this extract comes from the end of the play, it would make a slightly awkward essay. I always tell my class that actually what that means is referring to this moment from the play, i.e. you have to say something about this extract in order to get the good marks, but you don't have to start with it, because in reality what we start with is the big question. We don't start with the extract, we start with the question. And in this exam paper, consequences faced by individuals is the question. So that's our starting point to think about. What does Shakespeare seem to suggest about consequences faced by individuals? So what I'd like to do is to pause this video for about 4 or 5 minutes and start to make a few notes. What does Shakespeare seem to suggest about consequences? And I've given you 4 prompt questions on the screen to break that down. What does Macbeth do that lead to consequences? What are the immediate consequences? So what happens to Macbeth immediately after he does things? What are the longer term consequences? How do we see him change throughout the play? And is there a bigger message we can take from this? Is there more here than just the character of Macbeth? So please pause the video for 4 minutes to make some initial notes. Okay, so obviously I've done that task as well. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily with this, but the types of things that you will have been taught and that hopefully you came up with are listed on this screen. I think the key thing Shakespeare seems to suggest about consequences as they are inescapable and permanent. Macbeth says early in the play, before he ever kills King Duncan, that he wishes he could trammel up the consequences, which basically means catch them in a net, so that he can just have the glory of kingship without having to face the repercussions of what he's done. But Shakespeare constantly shows us through this that this is impossible. Macbeth has to face the negative consequences as well as achieve the power he so desired. The consequences get increasingly severe across the play. Obviously, immediately after killing King Duncan, the immediate consequence for Macbeth is guilt. He feels that he has completely destroyed himself. He wishes he could undo what he's done almost instantly and can't even go back with the daggers to face what he's done. This then progresses into fear. We see in Act 3 a much more primal and dangerous Macbeth, driven by fear. And as we get close further through the play, particularly into Act 5, we see his nihilism. We see him losing any sense that life has any value or purpose, and rejecting kind of religious and moral boundaries. And obviously the ultimate consequence is his death. And Macbeth reflects upon the fact within the play that because of the strong Christian context of the time, he's damned. His soul is damned to hell, if you like, because of the killing of the king. Other points I've put there. Shakespeare suggests the worst consequences are actually internal. Once Macbeth is the king, external consequences don't have much value to him. He's the king, so he can't really be held to account, even though everyone suspects him. But his conscience and the destruction to his soul is beyond his control. And then obviously something we've talked about a lot, the idea that evil can self-perpetuate. And self-perpetuate just means it can kind of grow by itself. And Macbeth's acts become increasingly devoid of humanity, increasingly evil as the play progresses, and he isn't in control of that. You may have additional points as well, but those are the kinds of things. So we're not just thinking about what happens in the play, oh, Macbeth kills the king, and oh, isn't it bad? We're thinking specifically, what happens, what are the emotions he feels, and what are the big messages that Shakespeare seems to present to humanity? Okay, so once you've done that, I suggest you actually start writing the essay, We haven't yet looked at the extract, but we've got enough done to create an introduction to an essay. And the acronym or the initialism we use for this is GST, which stands for General Specific Thesis. I think this is an excellent formula for creating an introduction to any essay. 3 sentences which are precise, clear, and have a specific function. The first sentence is general. So we give a general overview, a general response to the question in relation to what we know about the play. The second sentence allows us to say something more specific, something more detailed that builds what we've said in the first and kind of goes into bigger territory. And then the thesis is our go big moment, our chance to show the examiner that you're a candidate who's aiming for the high marks, that you can think beyond just what happens in the play and how Shakespeare presents ideas, and you can think about what are the big ideas. A thesis means basically a big argument or idea you intend to prove. And that's the key thing about a GST intro. And that's why I say you write it before you look at the extract. Because when you look at the extract, you'll be trying to prove what you've written in your intro, which I feel makes the whole process easier. Okay, all of that will make more sense if I show you how to do it. So I suggest that as I type this up and it appears on the screen, that you also write it, because you'll start to internalise the process. Obviously, if you prefer, you can just listen to me talk you through it. Okay, so obviously, first of all, I need my general sentence. So a general introduction to consequences. So all I'm going to try and set out in this is that Macbeth commits the ultimate act of evil in this play. He murders a king. By the standards of the age, that is a terrible act. And he faces a terrible range of consequences that escalate throughout the play. So it's quite a big idea, quite general, but that'll get me going. So I'm going to start by saying, in the play Macbeth, we see the protagonist commit the ultimate act of evil by the standards of the age. He kills the king and faces increasingly terrible consequences. Okay, so hopefully you can see that's quite general. I'm not just saying what happens in the play because there's no value in that, but I'm just giving a general answer to the question. So now I can be more specific. I can add more detail. So we can say what I've said in my first sentence, that he faces increasingly terrible consequences, but now I can say what they are. So we can say immediately, if I can spell that correctly, immediately after killing the king, Macbeth feels terrible guilt and regrets his actions. Don't want to stop there, because as the play progresses, he is consumed by fear and evil. So just add an E into terrible. Okay, so a bit more specific. I've used some words. I've said in the first sentence that he faces terrible consequences, and in this one I've said what they are. He's immediately feels guilt and then is consumed by fear and evil. This is our big one then, our thesis sentence, in which we're going to argue, we're going to forget about Macbeth in a way and think about what is the big message we can take. And this is when we're going to write one of our tentative sentences that you practiced in yesterday's lessons. So we'll start with a tentative phrase, it seems that, followed by the author's surname, Shakespeare, presented Macbeth this way in order to, and then we choose an intent verb. So maybe to warn the audience about the permanent and inescapable consequences of evil acts. So hopefully you can see that we've gone beyond character to think about a message, a big idea. Okay, I'm going to